Hi, I am Ninna Makrinov. I am a psychologist, and yes, I am fat. I am the Fat Psychologist. Join me to decode well-being research so it can have a real impact on our lives. Let's make decisions based on information we understand and question, not on what others say we should think of ourselves. In this series, I explore how we can be happy at any size. Today, we're talking about why did I call my podcast The Fat Psychologist? And when a lot of people would go, oh, don't say fat, don't call yourself that. And to me, there's nothing wrong with the word fat, it's just a descriptor. No one would look weirdly at me if I said, oh, don't call yourself thin, or don't call yourself fit, or other things. So why is fat so full of negative connotations, I suppose, is the word I'm looking for. That's something that I would like to explore today. So the first thing that I think is important for us to think about, and this is something that I started discussing with my guests in the previous episode, is the difference between all of these keywords that people use. So you might have come across the idea of fat activism, fat liberation, fat acceptance, body positivity, or body neutrality. And although they're kind of related, they do have different histories. And I think it's important to know that if you want to be an ally or want to start being part of this impressive movement. And to be honest, this is something I'm learning as I go along, because although I have been fat or considered fat most of my life, I have never identified with any of these groups before. So first ones, I suppose the most popular things that you will see on social media are the body positivity movement, where you see a lot of people who are going, actually, whatever you look like, your body is beautiful. And that's a really nice message. It also has some problems, because when we're focusing on beautiful, then what's happening in reality is that rather than saying everybody should be accepted, whatever we look like, is that the social media that's been related to these tends to have people who are traditionally beautiful, if fat. So young, white, there's a lot of people who show that they can still exercise when they're fat, and that's brilliant, there's nothing against it. The query is then, how are others included or not when we do that? So that's something we need to think of. So potentially, and this is something I read in an article that I'll put on the show notes later by Mary West on Medical News Today, so a really simple article, but there might be some benefits, but also some drawbacks on this idea of body positivity. So another potential way of thinking about this is body neutrality, which means it doesn't matter how your body is. It's important that you have a body which functions in a way that allows you to connect to the world. And I think there's some benefits there too, because we're saying, okay, great. We all need to have our bodies. We communicate to the world with bodies, and whatever our body looks like, and it, again, not specifically in that case with weight, it could be, again, race, it could be disabilities, it could be scarring, whatever it is, our bodies are so great because they allow us to be whatever we are. The issue there, obviously, is that then we're not focusing on fat. And what we know from a lot of research on different kinds of discrimination is that we need to focus specifically on that aspect if we want it to be seen. So hence, it's important that we focus on, in this case, the fact that I'm interested in, fat. And the two big movements there that, again, we would have come across is this idea of fat activism, fat liberation, or fat acceptance. Sorry for the history lesson if that's not of interest to you, but I think it's really important as we start this podcast to understand these issues. So we talked about fat activism in the previous podcast as well, but important little things that I've learned as I'm looking at this, and I love this story. So, fat acceptance was born through an association called NAFA. It's the, I think, American National Association for the Acceptance of Fat. Can't remember. I should know. Anyway, I should have copied it in my notes. I will put it on the notes so we have that access. It's a really lovely story of the power of activists too, because it was a movement that was partly started by a man who wanted to protect or support his wife who was fat, and he saw how badly she was treated a long time ago in the 60s, again in the States. There was another big group that was called the Fat Liberation. No, sorry. Fat Underground, we talked about fat liberation, which was a lot more activist than this just, I don't just want to be accepted. I want to be able to do more. And currently, NAFA is still working, and they have this vision that I love, which is a world where all fat people are free, celebrated, and liberated from every form of oppression. So I suppose that's something that all of us who are interested in eradicating oppression in our areas would be interested in. And all of these movements, and I'm getting a bit academic here, but all of these movements have certain things that are appearing in all of them. And Davison and Groover have an article that, again, I will link on the show notes that I read in another article by Oswald, again, will be on the show notes. And have said that there's 5 things that these movements share. And I am going to read them because I think they're really important. So, one is that they critique socio-medical claims about fatness and its relationship to health. What does that mean is that discrimination towards fat people has been accepted because we have this strong belief that fat is unhealthy. Hence, we're doing people a favor by always telling us or telling them we need to lose weight. And that there's quite a lot of critique on the literature. I'm not going to go in that here. I would suggest, if you're interested in these, there's 2 really important podcasts that I would go for. In the UK, The Fat Doctor does a really good work on this, and in the US, the maintenance phase. And there's also a movie about maintenance phase that I super recommend. And I should remember the name. I can't, but again, I'll put it in the show notes. I would love to have a screening in the UK so we could watch it together. So hopefully I'll organize that at some point. Now, the second aspect is challenging the socio-political and material conditions of fat people. So there is huge discrimination against fat people. I'll go back to that later. And we want to challenge that. The third one is refuting claims that link fatness to immorality. What we mean by refuting claims that link fatness to immorality, I can't say this, I'm saying immortality in my head, is that when people see a fat person, they make a judgment, or not every person, obviously, not all people do this, but many people, when they see a fat person, they make a moral judgment. It's bad to be fat. It's also lazy. People who are fat have certain characteristics. And this is something that we strongly rebuke. 4, it says critiquing epistemic practices which erase or obscure fat knowledges. That means that in the way we believe about knowledge, there's certain people who are validated as knowledgeable, others who are not, and fat people have been underrepresented in research and in the creation of knowledge in the world, so we want that to be challenged too. And finally, 5, countering thinness culture and rejecting appearance aesthetics as a basis for the value of human lives. And to me, that goes beyond fatness, and not only to me, because most of the fat activism movements are intersectional. So that's really important. We know that this is only one aspect. There are many others, potentially others, that people have more discrimination than we have as fat people, but obviously we're just talking about this not because we've forgotten about everything else, but because it's the focus we're taking now. Now, the academic in me is coming far too much, so I need to go for a different aspect now, so I will be a bit less academic. Now, we already talked about in the previous episode about another term, which is the term of health at every size, which is again brilliant, and it's about the need for every person to have access to healthcare, and that's because there's huge discrimination in healthcare as well. And we talked about that, so I'm not going to go that in detail, but that's where I picked the title for this series, which is called Happiness at Every Size. And to me, being happy at every size, or being happy in every body, I would say, requires me to question the beliefs that society has given me about who I am, who I can be, and who others are as well. But it goes beyond that. I'm an organizational psychologist by background, and we need to change the world to fit every person, not just some. And that will come across again, actually, when we think about some of the lingo, some of the language that people are using, which are things that I've just recently learned. And I actually have learned some in Spanish as well. I'm from Chile, so I need to join my Chilean friends and have a conversation in Spanish about this, because I think it's super interesting. But first thing, and this is something that I will, in the edit, I'll probably put a quote from Faith, who was in a previous episode, because she explained it really well. But in the fat community, people, or many people, not everyone, talk about categories of fatness. There's a post on a blog that went viral by Linda, who goes by Fluffy Kitten Party, and she wrote this blog called Understanding the Fat Spectrum. And what Linda explains there, and I actually didn't know this until very recently, is that in the fat community, they use labels to describe where we are in this spectrum. So people who are not fat might be referred as straight size people. Then there are people who are a little bit fat, who are called small fat. There are people then who are mid-fat, which is where I would be classed. So I'm mid-fat is what I would say if I was in a community that understood this language. And what this means is that I'm starting to experience, because of my size, limitations from the world. Much more, I mean, at every level of fatness there's discrimination, but it starts becoming more obvious. So, for example, I've started not being able to fit in chairs because they have the sides and they're not designed for big people. Or I need to ask for an extension in the plane for the seat. Or I need to check before I go to a cinema or to a show if the seats are big enough, or I need to ask for adjustments to get a chair in the back so I can fit. And that can be really shaming, particularly if you have to ask, and especially because for many people it's not an easy yes adjustment. It's just like, oh, you should have not be this fat. But obviously for people who are even bigger than I am, this is even harder. Hence, there's also these bigger fat people called that they're referred to as large fat, and then super fat and infini fat, where the levels of discrimination are huge and it's really complex, and not even getting to a car, so there's different issues there. And I would encourage reading again that if you want to know more. And then we also talk about fat phobia, which is this discrimination and almost kind of irrational thought that if you're around fat people, then it will catch, or that because it's immoral, it's not good to you. So you might come across those when we're talking about this. And I also wanted to talk about some of the lingo and terms I hate, which actually I have seen many people in the fat communities hate as well. So I would prefer if when you're talking about me, you avoid using terms such as overweight. And the reason for that is that overweight assumes that there's an ideal weight that you can be over or under. So it's very ruling. It's like, oh, you need to be this and anything else is bad. So I don't like it. I prefer the descriptor fat because we're fighting against that. Now, our one we absolutely hate, and if you read literature from the community, you'll notice they would not even use it, but I am going to use it today because I'm in this kind of assuming that many people who are listening in are not fat people, or if they are, they're not involved in the movement, so this is new to us. So it was new to me recently. So obese in general, no. Particularly morbidly obese. It sounds so horrible. Like I am classed as morbidly obese. I'm like, I'm not morbid. I'm just me. And it just doesn't sound nice. Same with plus size related to overweight. So it's that idea that I'm over any size there should be. And then I also hate the word fluffy, although I know there's a lot of fat people who refer to themselves as fluffy. But I'm like, I'm not fluffy, I'm quite fit, or not, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's parts of me that are fluffy, but not the whole of me. And also, what does that mean? So, in terms of experience, I've been called all these things for my life. So again, doctors, it's really hard because in the medical profession, it's super common to use obesity as a measure, body mass index, so BMI as a measure, and again, there's a huge discourse on this. So I will probably do a different episode with the health aspects and the kind of why we reject this idea so much. And what I really would like us all to do is to challenge and learn that there is these levels of discrimination for fat people. The final thing I wanted to talk to you about today has to do with that. What do we know about discrimination of fat people? And it's called in different ways. So you might see it as either fat or obese discrimination, or stigma are common words that are used out there. And because I'm a bit of an academic, I am going to talk about academic things that I've written, but hopefully I'm talking about them in a language that makes sense to you. So I really, really like reading recently an article by Oswald. I need to learn their names. It doesn't sound right to use these academic things. So I first, action for me in the future, use first names as well. So this was in the US, which again, a lot of the studies are in the US, so we don't know so much about other areas. But they did a study looking at how people who are in all levels of the spectrum, so from straight-bodied to infinity fat, perceive activism and fat activism in particular. And although what they found is that for most people, they actually perceived these movements are accurate or at least positive, some, and this is had really negative perceptions of activism and people who are doing this work. So when we put ourselves out there will be, we know, some who would think we're doing something wrong. For example, 5% of those who, or 5% of the comments said things that or said that activists were excusing unhealthy behavior or promoting fatness as healthy. So it's like we wanted everyone to be fat. That's not the point. We want everyone, whatever their size is, to be accepted for who we are as humans who have value. And actually that takes me to another thing. There's a huge, I am aware that there's a huge issue with people who are ultra thin as well. So that can also be a problem. And so and I also know that this is cultural. So this is very much the West, and there are other regions in the world where being fat's a great thing, and we've discussed that again in the first episode. So go back if you haven't seen it yet. Now, they also, this is much lower, but some people, this is 2% in this study of over 1,000 people were in the survey, thought that it was forcing others to accommodate. And one example taken specifically from what someone said, they do it to get special privileges, like 2 seats for the price of 1 on an airplane. Which I think is really sad, because that's not it. If the planes were a bit bigger, we wouldn't need 2 seats. I mean, or bigger people wouldn't need 2 seats. So it's like the space that it's not designed for us that is a real problem. And then when they were thinking about what activists in this area want to do, they were saying that they wanted to enable unhealthiness, and that was 8.5%, which is really, really high, I think. Or that activists were lazy people, or those who do not want to lose weight. Directly from a quote: lazy, fat, liberal people. And that is 4% of the answers. So again, not great, is it? And then I thought, okay, this is what people think about activists. What do people who, whatever their views are they activists or not, even if they're trying to lose weight, which again, I'll discuss that and how that can be very dangerous in other episodes. But what happens then with this? And actually, there's a lot of evidence out there that there's huge discrimination against fat people in many countries. Again, I don't want to overgeneralize here. But again, an article in the US, a very recent one, with over 1,500 people who considered themselves overweight. They looked at how fat discrimination had affected them or was related to, because this is a correlational study, all measured at the same time. So they found that fat discrimination, and apologies, there's a dog barking on back out, that's my dog, who also appeared on the first episode. So they found that fat discrimination, identification as being fat, so when I say I am fat, and stress and unhealthy eating are all related. And what we don't really know is how that relationship works. So does it mean that because I'm unhealthy eating, then I get fat and that makes me stressed, or other ways? We don't know. However, what these authors proposed as a conclusion was that the fact that people face fat discrimination, the fact that we are already discriminated against whatever we do, makes us then identify as fat, which actually really interesting when it's other characteristics. Research shows that identifying with your group, it's a protector, but in the case of weight, it is not. So then I suppose of the self-judgment comes in as well. That's how I would believe that to happen. That impacts on higher levels of stress, and then that leads to unhealthy eating, and then that will be happening again and again. So again, we need to be really careful with that. And then the ones that I really want to talk about, because this brings me back, this is again very personal. I have issues with this, but I'm going to talk only about the positives and how happy this makes me today. So there's a researcher called Sophia Bajorek actually. Sophia does a lot of work currently on stigma of obesity at work, or she has been doing this work. And why I'm saying this makes me happy is because long time ago, when this was like 20 years ago, when I was working at the University of Nottingham, Sosha was doing her master's, and I was her master's supervisor. And she's done so well. She's completed her PhD, and she's one of the most renowned researchers in the UK on many aspects of work and health, which I think is super amazing. So anyway, so what is also interesting about Sosha's work is that she's been working with different countries. There are various articles that are come out from that, but I want to pick some of the things that were found. So in the UK, Sosha and her team found that weight-based stigma is evident at recruitment and selection in jobs. So they're looking at work, and this relates to some employers arguing that appearance is very important for their customers. So again, that resonates a lot with my life. So being told directly that not in the UK. So in the UK, I've never felt this way, but in Chile and in Mexico, that I could not do a job because I was a bad example because of the way I look. Then that has an impact. The HR professionals have the same stigmas, and then this has an impact on earnings, for example. So in different countries, and we can see they've done a study in Spain and one in the Netherlands as well. In average, women who are fat, particularly women, earn around 8 to 10% less than those who are not fat. And apparently, according to this report, this can be as large as 20% lower. So according to that, if you like numbers, this doesn't mean much to me, but these could be up to, or around actually, 10 billion wage penalty for women for being fat. So it's not only that, we're wimps, it's also we're earning less, which means we will have less income on retirement, which also means that probably we can not afford the same kinds of food because healthy food tends to be more expensive. So there are all of these issues at work as well that are having a huge impact on fat people in the community. And this again is the same in Spain, it's the same in the Netherlands, and it tends to be many places in the West. So I suppose all that I wanted to say today leads to this. So what is it that I want to do? And this is what I am doing. So I've decided that I own the fat. I am fat, and that's okay. The word to me doesn't cause me pain anymore. Only causes me pain when I go back to people who are telling me these things to my face, that I should lose weight, that I should be different. So please don't do that if you can. And there are things we can all do. So I'll leave us with a positive message. First, there are some people that I would agree with this. So I would super recommend that weight and generally looks, because again, there's other issues with other discrimination areas where I worry, but weight should be included as a protected characteristic. And that I think is super, super important, because sadly, what we're seeing in the UK is that there's great work, or there's starting to be great work in equality, diversity, and inclusion at work in particular, but that's very much linked to what's protected. And if anything's not protected, no one does anything about it. That leads me to the next one, which is inform ourselves. So learn about these things. Even for me, who have been, I have been fat for a very long time, many of these things are new. So I don't expect anyone to know, but let's do our work and find it out. And then again, super positive. There's evidence as well that if we learn, we can reduce weight discrimination. So Kelly and colleagues did a study just in 2024 where they found that workplace training can reduce weight discrimination. So actually, let's include this in our work, in our environments, and let's have these conversations with other people we know. Because if you've never been fat, or if you haven't had fat friends, you might not be aware of all these issues. So I just call us all to be activists and to be allies. So thanks for listening. It's been lovely to have you around.